The hunt for the most wanted terrorists in the world is finally over.
The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda.
In a daring mission, U.S. Navy SEALs raid his hideaway in Pakistan and gun down the man behind the 9/11 attacks. Celebrations erupt all over America. But for families of the 9/11 victims, the pain never ends.
I miss my son.
Every day.
Every day, every hour. You know, he's my star.
And there are reminders everywhere that the war on terror is far from over.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric reporting tonight from Ground Zero in New York.
And this is a special expanded edition. Good evening, everyone. It took 9 years, 7 months, and 20 days, but the United States has made good on a vow to hunt down the man who ordered the 9/11 attacks. U.S. forces found Osama bin Laden yesterday in his hideaway compound in Pakistan and killed him. President Obama made the announcement in a late-night address to the nation.
Today, at my direction, the United States launched a targeted operation against that compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. A small team of Americans carried out the operation with extraordinary courage and capability. No Americans were harmed. They took care to avoid civilian casualties. After a firefight, they killed Osama bin Laden and took custody of his body.
And then they buried him at sea. Today, the FBI updated its website to show the most wanted terrorists in the world wanted no more. We have extensive coverage tonight from CBS News correspondents all over the country and all around the world. First, national security correspondent David Martin on how this long-awaited day finally came.
Katie, the hunt that ended Monday morning in Pakistan began years ago when high-level al-Qaeda operatives first revealed the existence of bin Laden's favorite courier. Some of the leads to that courier came out of the CIA's secret prison where those al-Qaeda captives were waterboarded. He was described as a protege of 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the man who delivered bin Laden's orders to al-Qaeda operatives in the field. But it was not until 4 years ago that U.S. intelligence determined the courier's real name. Take a look at it. It cost bin Laden his life. It took another 2 years to find out what part of Pakistan Abd al-Khaliq operated in. Then, last August, an intercepted phone call led the CIA to his residence. We were shocked by what we saw, one official said.
This intelligence case is different. What we see in this compound is different than anything we've ever seen before.
A $1 million compound, 8 times bigger than any of the other homes in a town where retired Pakistani military officers live just 35 miles north of the capital of Islamabad. It was built in 2005, apparently just for bin Laden. Walls as high as 18 feet topped with barbed wire. The main building with opaque windows facing out and a 7-foot privacy wall on the third-floor balcony. The residents of the compound burned their trash instead of putting it out for collection, and despite the $1 million price tag, there was no telephone or internet service. 3 families lived there. The couriers, his brothers, and a third family about the size of bin Laden's. It was a convincing but circumstantial case. President Obama considered attacking with B-2 stealth bombers flying nonstop from the U.S., but instead he chose the option that offered the best chance of coming away with proof bin Laden had been killed: a helicopter raid by Navy SEALs. It was also the riskiest. American commandos operating without permission deep inside Pakistani territory. The operation was so tightly held that when the SEALs began training on a mock-up of the compound, they were not told who the real target was.
There were multiple opportunities to do that in terms of going through the exercises to prepare for it so that once they hit the compound, they had already simulated that a number of times.
The operation was set for Saturday, but had to be postponed today due to weather. At 1:30 Monday morning Pakistani time, 2 Black Hawk helicopters carried about 25 SEALs to the compound, with a second team as backup. As the SEALs fast-roped in, one of the helos stalled, apparently when it hit its own rotor wash inside the walled compound. The stalled helo had to land.
When that helicopter was seen to be unable to move, all of a sudden you had to go into Plan B.
The 22 people who lived in the compound, many of them women and children, were caught by surprise. But bin Laden and his men put up a fight.
He was engaged in a firefight with those that entered the area of the house that he was in, and whether or not he got off any rounds, I quite frankly don't know.
Video taken the morning after showed a bloody and shattered compound. The SEALs cleared the smaller building first, killing the courier and his brother, then moved to the main building where bin Laden and his family lived on the second and third floors. Bin Laden's son was killed, and so was a woman, when the men tried to use her as a human shield.
Here is bin Laden, who has been calling for these attacks, living in this $1 million-plus compound, living in an area that is far removed from the front, hiding behind women who were put in front of him as a shield.
Bin Laden was one of the last to die, shot once in the head, once in the chest. The SEALs carried his body to the helicopter, along with any material they could gather for intelligence purposes. The second helo could not fly, so they rigged it with explosives and blew it up. This daytime photo shows what was left. Facial recognition technology confirmed the body was bin Laden's, and this morning a DNA match removed virtually any doubt.
Now we can say with 99.9% confidence that this was bin Laden.
The body was flown to an aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea, where it was washed, wrapped in a white sheet, and placed in a weighted bag. Then the world's most infamous man was sent to the bottom of the ocean.
In the words of one U.S. official, bin Laden had been hiding in plain sight, but now he has vanished into an unmarked grave without a shrine to remember him by. Katie?
David Martin at the Pentagon. David, thanks so much. Now to Chip Reid at the White House. Chip, they have to be very pleased with how this turned out. Can you tell us about the extensive planning that went into this operation?
Well, absolutely, Katie. They've been planning this operation for more than 8 months. Countless meetings here at the White House, dozens and dozens of hours of surveillance over in Pakistan. And of course, the Navy SEALs had to rehearse the mission over and over again. But in the end, it came down to a period of just 40 minutes when it could either be a major success or a disastrous failure. To give you an idea of how thick the tension was in the Situation Room at the White House, take a look at this photo. During those 40 minutes, they were actually watching it unfold in real time. Take a look at the president's eyes. Look at Hillary Clinton covering her mouth. John Brennan, the president's top counterterrorism advisor, says it was one of the most anxiety-filled periods of time that anyone in that room had ever experienced. He said the minutes passed like days, and we're told that when it finally became clear to the president that this mission was going to succeed, he announced to the room in a calm voice, "We got him." Katie?
Chip Reid at the White House. Chip, thank you. For years, many assumed bin Laden was holed up in one of Pakistan's remote tribal regions, possibly in a cave. But his hiding place was actually just 35 miles from the capital. Elizabeth Palmer is in Islamabad tonight. And Liz, what is the official response there to the U.S. raid against bin Laden? From here in America, it seems very muted.
Very muted. No response at all from the president's office. In fact, the most complete statement came out of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, which said simply that the operation had been carried out by U.S. forces in accordance with U.S. policy, and that the killing of Osama bin Laden demonstrated Pakistan's dedication, along with the international community, to eliminate terrorism. It seems almost as if they're trying not to claim credit for it, which is probably not a surprise because he had many, many sympathizers in this country. And for the government to own up to having a role in his killing could really destabilize Pakistan and certainly provoke violence. Katie?
And Liz, along those lines, Pakistan's former president Pervez Musharraf made some very provocative comments about this raid. He used to be our close ally. What's going on there?
Well, on the one hand, he did say it was a positive thing, but then he went on to say that it was an infringement of Pakistani sovereignty to have the U.S. come in and carry out this operation without any visible Pakistani cooperation. He's voicing the opinion of a lot of people here. It remains to be seen tomorrow and the days to follow whether some violence does ensue. Katie?
All right, Liz Palmer in Islamabad tonight. Thank you so much, Liz. Now, before he went on television to announce bin Laden's death, President Obama telephoned former Presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush to tell them. Bush, who once said he wanted bin Laden dead or alive, congratulated President Obama as well as the U.S. military and intelligence communities and said America has sent an unmistakable message. No matter how long it takes, justice will be done. President Obama, meanwhile, said the world is safer with bin Laden gone, but no one's declaring victory in the war on terror. Homeland Security correspondent Bob Warnow on the continuing terror threat.
The killing of Osama bin Laden was trumpeted on the FBI's list of most wanted terrorists with a single word on a red banner: deceased. But the death of al-Qaeda's founder and spiritual leader does not end the terror threat. Across America today, heavily armed police bolstered patrols at airports from Boston to Los Angeles, train stations in New York and San Francisco, and around the U.S. Capitol in Washington.
We should expect al-Qaeda to try to do something. Sympathizers of bin Laden, sympathizers of al-Qaeda in general, will be looking to take action to avenge bin Laden's death.
While sources say there is no credible intelligence pointing to an imminent terror attack, radical Islamist websites are vowing revenge. And in an internal message today to the CIA, Director Leon Panetta issued his own stark warning. Though bin Laden is dead, al-Qaeda is not, he wrote. The terrorists almost certainly will attempt to avenge him. The greatest threat may come from American-born cleric Anwar al-Awlaki and his Yemen-based terror network, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Awlaki and AQAP have already tried twice to hit the U.S., first with the failed Christmas Day 2009 underwear bomb plot, and again last fall with explosives hidden in printers. And there's also increased worry about so-called lone wolves, individuals like Major Nidal Hassan at Fort Hood, who are moved by al-Qaeda's message to strike out in the name of bin Laden and his terror network.
It may be a mortally wounded tiger that still has some life in it, and it's dangerous, and we need to keep up the pressure. We cannot relent.
Now, the U.S. has not raised its terror threat level, but U.S. military bases around the world are on alert. And the FBI has now ordered all field offices to press for any evidence at all of new plots against America. Katie?
Bob Orr reporting from Washington tonight. And still ahead here on the CBS Evening News from Ground Zero, living with the loss. We check back in with a son growing up without his father. But up next, he was hiding just a half mile from a military training facility. What did the Pakistanis know? Back now from Ground Zero in New York, President Obama's counterterrorism chief, John Brennan, says Osama bin Laden had to have plenty of help to elude capture in Pakistan for nearly a decade. Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Lara Logan is in Washington tonight. Lara, were the Pakistanis protecting him?
Well, it certainly looks that way, Katie. No one wants to come out and say it, and no one's pointing a finger directly at Pakistani officials, but everyone from politicians to counterterrorism officials to special operations, are saying it's impossible, improbable, unlikely, inconceivable that the Pakistanis did not know that Osama bin Laden was there. And just the nature of the compound alone that he was living in, where it was located, all of this seems to indicate that it really is inconceivable that the Pakistanis not only knew he was there, but were protecting him.
And so what do you think this means for U.S.-Pakistani relations going forward?
Well, that's the interesting part, Katie, because although on the one hand the U.S. is clearly angry with Pakistan about this, in their public statements at least, they're treading very carefully, which is perhaps a sign of the fact that the U.S. still needs Pakistan. I mean, they are a complicated ally, to say the least, but they remain, in theory, an ally in the war on terror, and there are still a number of very significant al-Qaeda leaders, Taliban leadership, and others who remain on Pakistani soil. So the U.S. will be looking for cooperation, but I have to say that the relationship has been at its lowest point for a long, long time. And this is a moment where the U.S. can really use some leverage here and regain the upper hand, because the U.S. certainly has not had the upper hand in this relationship for some time.
All right, Lara Logan. Lara, thanks. And coming up next, portraits of grief. Some families of 9/11 victims finally feel some relief. Nearly 3,000 people died on September 11th, 2001. Each anniversary, they're remembered here in Lower Manhattan, at the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. But their families live with the loss every day of the year.
But I try not to focus on that.
Many family members called the news of bin Laden's death bittersweet, and they're still trying to process it.
My situation has not changed. You know, my kids still don't have their father. I would hope now that a lot of the killing in this war could be ended. Like, bring the troops home now.
Sonia Houston lost her husband, Uhuru, a Port Authority police officer. Her son, Hassani, only 4 at the time and now 14, says he never felt vengeful.
I knew that that he was responsible. I knew that he was a bad person, but I never thought that he had to die. We had to get him.
And just as it was when we interviewed him 5 years ago, he still has his father's jacket and says one day perhaps he'll be a police officer too. Do you still miss him?
I miss him a lot. I was 4, but I still remember the moments we had.
Ginny Bauer became a victim's advocate after her husband David was killed working at the financial firm Cantor Fitzgerald. Osama bin Laden's demise is a testament, she says, to America's persistence and commitment, and a tribute to all who died.
I'm just so proud of our country. It might have been a long time coming, but we were successful. They did it. They got him.
Carrie Lamac's mother, Judy LaRoque, was on American Airlines Flight 11 when it crashed into the World Trade Center.
It's important today that the victims' voices are stronger and louder than that of the terrorists. And today we know that bin Laden's voice has been silenced.
She says her mission is to keep her mother's spirit alive.
My mom was a big Red Sox fan, so she brought my sister and I up to believe that anything is possible. And in 2004, when they finally won the World Series for the first time in 86 years, it was her birthday.
In the wake of her mother's death, Carrie produced a documentary about global terrorism that she hopes will send a message of nonviolence to would-be radicals.
We were always upset that bin Laden and other terrorists get to release these videos and get all this publicity. And we thought, well, if they do it, why shouldn't we?
9/11 left a lasting legacy on the Riches family. 3 of the boys became firefighters after oldest son Jimmy perished that day. He was 29. Jim Riches, a deputy fire chief, almost died himself of respiratory problems he suffered as a first responder. The news about Osama bin Laden has finally provided him with some relief.
We'll always have a hole in our heart, but it's nice to know that the men who bragged that they murdered our children have met death.
But he didn't focus on the death of bin Laden for long.
I miss my son, you know.
Every day.
Every day, every hour. You know, he's my shining star.
Good evening again, everyone. And for those of you just joining us, we're at Ground Zero in New York City, where the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center once stood. You can see the footprints behind me. In fact, they'll be turned into reflecting pools at the memorial here. Tonight, the man who ordered the attack that destroyed the towers is dead, killed by U.S. Navy SEALs at his hideout in Pakistan in an attack ordered by President Obama. Chip Reed is at the White House tonight. And Chip, that's where this operation was planned.
Well, Katie, this operation has been in the planning stages for more than 8 months, and President Obama was deeply involved every step of the way.
Our country has kept its commitment to see that justice is done. The world is safer. It is a better place because of the death of Osama bin Laden.
The operation began over 7 months ago. August 2010, President Obama is briefed about a rare lead after a bin Laden courier is traced to a massive secure compound in Pakistan. Mid-February 2011, after months of surveillance, U.S. officials conclude there's a strong likelihood bin Laden is living at the compound. The president orders operational plans to capture or kill him. March and April, the president chairs a series of meetings with his national security team to finalize the plan. And this past Friday, 8:20 a.m., minutes before leaving for Alabama to survey tornado damage, the president orders the operation to proceed. The day arrives Sunday, May 1st. 10:06 a.m., the president goes golfing at a military base in Maryland as he waits for the mission to begin. He plays only 9 holes, returning to the White House at 2:11 p.m. At 3:32, he enters the Situation Room. The president was able to monitor the operation from start to finish as it happened in real time.
It was probably one of the most anxiety-filled periods of time, I think, in the lives of the people who were assembled here yesterday. The minutes passed like days.
The operation began when 2 Black Hawk helicopters carried about 25 Navy SEALs into the compound. Inside, bin Laden and his men engaged in a firefight. Bin Laden was killed by a shot to the head, another to the chest. Video shot the morning after showed a blood-stained compound. There were no U.S. casualties. Bin Laden's body was taken to a U.S. ship and buried at sea. As revelers celebrated across the nation, some who have accused the president of being soft in the war on terrorism had nothing but praise.
And let me, as a Republican, give President Obama tremendous credit for what was done. He's the commander-in-chief. This was an amazingly successful military operation.
Even former Vice President Dick Cheney, perhaps his harshest critic, said in a statement, "I want to congratulate President Obama and the members of his national security team."
You can expect the president will get a political bounce in the polls from this. People see him in command, in control of this signature moment, perhaps the most important moment in the fight against terrorists. The question is, how long will it last?
CBS News has learned that intelligence analysts say 2 reasons that they decided Osama bin Laden must be in that compound are: number 1, a very tall man paced in the courtyard every day for an hour, and second, the courier lived in the guest house. The tall man, Osama bin Laden, lived in the main house. Katie?
Chip Reed. Chip, thanks very much. Juan Zarate is a terrorism expert, a former advisor to President George W. Bush, and now a CBS News consultant. Juan, how risky was this operation?
Katie, this was a highly risky operation. It was an operation deep inside Pakistan, a compound in a heavily populated city with imperfect intelligence. It was a risky gamble, and the president took it. But it was the best chance to get bin Laden since the Battle of Tora Bora. And when it was executed, they got bin Laden, they killed him, took his body, and exploited the site.
And Juan, why was bin Laden's body buried at sea?
Well, American officials, Katie, didn't want to create a sacred site or a rallying point for extremists. And so what they did was made a decision to dump his body in the sea, and that's where his body will remain.
And is there pressure to give absolute proof that this really was bin Laden who was killed?
Katie, I think there's going to be likely mounting pressure to prove that bin Laden was killed, especially now that there is no body. The U.S. government has the DNA proof and tests to show pictures as well of bin Laden's body, as well as testimony from those who were interrogated at the site, the women who were at the compound. And so how and when that information will be revealed is still unclear. But it is clear that the administration will want to be very careful as to how it releases that information, in particular the photographs.
And can you tell us what was recovered from this compound? I know the CIA is already analyzing this. Was it a treasure trove of information?
Absolutely, Katie. I think the Navy SEALs were surprised at what they found. There were more documents and equipment than they expected. Things like computers, hard drives, files, CD-ROMs, etc. And so there was quite a bit to not only take back, but now to exploit. And so analysts are now looking at information, looking at that data to find plots and attacks as well as other information for al-Qaeda leaders.
All right, Juan Zarate. Juan, thanks so much. There were demonstrations today in places like Yemen, Syria, and Libya, but they had nothing to do with bin Laden's death. Few protesters seem to view the al-Qaeda leader as a martyr. Mandy Clark reports tonight from Benghazi in eastern Libya.
In the nearly 10 years since Osama bin Laden went into hiding, the Arab world has changed in ways no one could have predicted. A whole generation of young people took to the streets to battle corrupt dictatorships. But they're demanding democracy, not bin Laden's brand of extremism.
I don't think that Al-Qaeda or other similar jihadist movements have much of a future in the region as long as these revolutions are continuing.
Even in bin Laden's ancestral home, Yemen, some protesters applauded the news.
Osama bin Laden deserved to be killed before he distorted the image of Islam even more.
In Libya, where the protests have turned into an armed conflict, the rebels stress they have no Al-Qaeda connection.
Thank you, Obama. Thank you, Sarkozy.
In Jordan, confidence in bin Laden fell from 56% in 2003 to just 13% this year. Among Palestinians, the drop was from 72% to 34% in the same period. Some leaders were bucking that trend today.
We condemn the assassination and the killing of an Arab and Muslim holy warrior.
But Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood found a way to say that bin Laden's death was an opportunity.
That can build and make a bridge between the West and the Arab and the Islamic world.
The biggest difference between 9/11 and 2011 is that Al-Qaeda is in danger of becoming irrelevant. As one revolution after another sweeps through the Arab world, bin Laden was left standing in the sidelines. Katie?
Mandy Clark in Benghazi, Libya. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton says Pakistan's cooperation helped lead the U.S. to bin Laden, but there he was, just a half mile from Pakistan's version of West Point. Once again, here's Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Lara Logan in Washington. Lara, how can anyone believe that the Pakistanis did not know about Osama bin Laden and where he was living?
Well, it seems improbable at this point, Katie, and the biggest question raised by this operation to kill Osama bin Laden deep inside Pakistan, as the president made a point of saying, is how could the world's most wanted man have been living in the midst of Pakistan's military elite just an hour's drive from their capital? One man who wasn't at all surprised is Afghanistan's former spy chief and for years the CIA's lead source on Osama bin Laden, Amrullah Saleh. In a rare 60 Minutes interview, he told us recently that America's greatest enemy in that region is not Al-Qaeda, it's Pakistan.
You have to give Pakistan a title. Is it a friend? What is Pakistan?
It currently has the title of ally.
Right, deceptive.
So you think its title should be?
It should be a hostile country, a hostile state.
So Pakistan is the enemy of the U.S.?
The amount of pain Pakistan has inflicted upon the United States in the past 12 years is unprecedented. No other country has inflicted that amount of pain upon your nation.
That pain is Pakistan's long-term support for Al-Qaeda and its allies, battling U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Today, the president's counterterrorism chief also seemed to point the finger at Pakistan.
I think it's inconceivable that bin Laden did not have a support system in the country that allowed him to remain there for an extended period of time.
That was more blunt than Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, whose carefully worded statement seemed mindful of the fact that the U.S. still needs Pakistan's help in the war on terror.
Our partnerships, including our close cooperation with Pakistan, have helped put unprecedented pressure on Al-Qaeda and its leadership.
That talk of continued cooperation hints at what one top U.S. counterterrorism official told me, that they're closely watching Pakistan, basically to see who they're going to cough up now that the heat is on them. The U.S. has no doubt got their eye on Al-Qaeda's number 2, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and Taliban leader Mullah Omar, who are both believed to be protected inside Pakistan, along with a number of other significant leaders, Katie.
All right, Lara Logan, thank you, Lara. And still ahead on this expanded edition of the CBS Evening News from Ground Zero, a survivor of 9/11 dealing with a sudden flood of memories. But up next, bin Laden is gone, but New York City can't let its guard down.
Bin Laden publicly vowed to wage a terrorist war against America, saying, and I quote, "We do not differentiate between those dressed in military uniforms and civilians. They're all targets.
I want justice. And there's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said, "Wanted, dead or alive."
If we have Osama bin Laden in our sights and the Pakistani government is unable or unwilling to take them out, then I think that we have to act, and we will take them out.
Back now from Ground Zero, which has served as a constant reminder of how vulnerable this city is to terror attacks. Aaron Moriarty of 48 Hours spoke today with the man whose job it is to keep 8 million New Yorkers and countless visitors safe. And Aaron, in the city that never sleeps, that's a round-the-clock job.
Oh, it is. Hi, Katie. It's kind of frightening fact that in the past decade, there have been at least 12 plots against the city of New York that were either planned or inspired by bin Laden. And tonight, security experts and the city's police commissioner tell CBS News that the threat may be greater than ever.
It's clear that law enforcement in New York City is not letting down its guard tonight, but in fact beefing up security.
Is it fair to say that we are more at risk today than we've been at any other time since 9/11?
In my estimation, I would say yes. This is kind of the start of things, not the end of things. I don't think this ended anything.
The biggest concern, say security experts, lone wolf terrorists like Faisal Shahzad, who exactly a year ago tried to bomb Times Square. Bin Laden's death, heralded in huge newspaper headlines, may spark more copycats bent on revenge.
This city, unfortunately, is at the top of the terrorist target list.
What keeps New York Police Commissioner Ray Kelly up at night, he says, is the possibility of a catastrophic event.
On the top of the priority list is the possibility of a dirty bomb or, God forbid, a full-blown nuclear event taken from...
One of Kelly's main weapons is this state-of-the-art security center, which puts more and more of the city under 24-hour surveillance. In just the past 6 months, 500 cameras have been added to the subway system, feared a possible prime target. But with all this high-tech equipment, sometimes it comes down to luck and an eagle-eyed vendor who saw smoke from Shahzad's bomb-laden vehicle and alerted police.
We've done a lot, but we were lucky as well. Of course, we'll take luck every time.
And there are signs that people in this city are also becoming more vigilant. Normally, there are about 26 calls a day about suspicious packages. Today, there were 40 before noon. Katie?
All right, Aaron Moriarty. Aaron, thank you. And coming up next, firefighters fighting back tears. Back now from Ground Zero in New York. On 9/11, firefighters arrived here just minutes after the first plane hit the World Trade Center. 343 of them lost their lives, as did 23 members of the New York Police Department and 37 Port Authority police officers. Jim Axelrod reports on the reaction of first responders to the death of bin Laden.
This picture of firefighters from Engine 54, Ladder 4, Battalion 9 spoke volumes about Osama bin Laden getting hunted down.
Like everybody else, in the city, you kind of go, yes, yeah, good job, boys, good job.
But there was plenty more to say at their station house in Midtown Manhattan. 15 men from this firehouse were killed on 9/11. Chris Santora, 23, had been on the job 3 months.
When did you finally release into understanding this is for real?
Probably this morning, when I woke up with this tremendous grin.
It's been nearly a decade since Maureen Santora buried her son's remains. That day, she was the very picture of heartbreak. Today was for an entirely different set of emotions.
I'm just filled with joy that my son is up in heaven, screaming and yelling and saying, "We got him. We got him, Ma."
In the back of the station house, we found firefighter John Fila, a bit more somber.
I don't know if I could ever move forward from it. It's always going to be there.
Fila was supposed to be working that day, but he switched shifts with Chris Santora.
10 years later, does any part of that shift switching plague you?
Every day. Every day.
There are 343 stories like this in and around New York City about firefighters who lost their lives but forged a lasting impression on the soul of this city.
So, he would approach you with something,
So you?
Yeah.
You don't even have a chance to soak this all in today because you
like
guys
I said,
got to go to work.
You fall back on routine, you know, like this is one part of it, and then now I'm back to work.
Maybe that's what makes first responders different than everyone else, even today. They don't have time to dwell. Just like on 9/11, they've got a job to do. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, New York.
And coming up next, shaken by the news of bin Laden's demise nearly a decade after their lives were shattered. The White House has just announced that President Obama will come here to Ground Zero on Thursday and meet with families of the victims of 9/11. For many of them, this has been an emotional day filled with memories of the people they loved and lost. Leslie Haskin was an executive at Kemper Insurance on the 36th floor of Tower 1 when the first plane hit. She was one of the last people to escape the building.
There was debris and body parts and furniture falling outside the window. I lost 22 of my friends. I lost a man who I loved dearly.
When she heard bin Laden had been killed, the memories came rushing back.
It has knocked the wind out of me, and I need to figure out again how to regroup.
I can only imagine the look on Osama bin Laden's face when he saw Navy SEALs. This is not a good day.
David Beamer's son Todd became a modern-day folk hero when he rallied his fellow passengers on Flight 93 and tried to overtake the hijackers, saying, "Let's roll." The plane instead crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Todd's father said his son was killed in the line of duty, doing the right thing. He was as elated by the news that the 40 Navy SEALs had survived as he was by the fact that Osama bin Laden had died.
Osama bin Laden has met his American justice. And in addition, he's met divine justice. I'm a Christian. Todd was a Christian. We believe there's a heaven and a hell. I don't know what Osama bin Laden believed, but now he knows.
I understand that it is a good day, you know, for America and for the families that lost loved ones that day.
Anthula Katsamatides' loved one was her 31-year-old brother, John. She says she wasn't prepared for the emotions this day would bring.
In the beginning, I was crying and didn't understand why. Because you think that after 10 years, you know, the tears will stop coming, but they don't. They don't. I missed him like I missed him on September 12th, you know?
And that's our special edition of the CBS Evening News. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks for watching. Good night.